It's those tenancies which are sort of in progress when the regulations come in on the 1st of June. So, in simple terms, for example, Rachel Tor at Whitaker and Biggs asks, what happens to ASTs which are on a rolling contract where the tenants have paid for a checkout report months ago?
Right. So I'll come back to the checkout report in a second, if I may. Just quickly to go through the transitionary provisions, and this is what these are called. All Acts of Parliament come into force on a specific date, and on that date there will be, in our case, millions of tenancies in existence, and therefore the Act of Parliament has to say what happened to those existing tenancies. So first and foremost, the Tenant Fees Ban applies to tenancies entered into on or after the 1st of June 2019. Entered into means signed by both parties and dated. Therefore, something tells me there's going to be a lot of tenancies entered into on Friday, the 31st of May. So for any contract, and I would also add, it doesn't matter when the tenancy starts, it's about when the contract was entered into, when the tenancies were signed and dated. So for existing tenancies, and even for tenancies that haven't actually started but the contracts are signed, you can continue charging fees for a period of 12 months, up to and including the 31st of May 2020. Right. So even things like student tenancies that are starting in September, October, but they're signed now, that's all fine. Continue charging fees up to the 31st of May. Now, if the tenancy renews during that period, you can charge the renewal fee, because that is a fee associated with the existing tenancy, but you can't then charge any further fees because the renewal tenancy is a new tenancy under the law, and therefore fees drop after that because it is a new tenancy entered into after the ban comes into force. If the tenancy drops onto a statutory or contractual periodic after the ban has come into force, that will be viewed for this legislation as a continuation of the existing tenancy, and you will be able to continue charging fees up until the 31st of May 2020. Now, specifically on the checkouts that are taken up front, this is one where agents are going to have to be very, very careful, because if the tenancy renews, the moment you sign that renewal tenancy, that checkout fee that you've already taken automatically becomes a prohibited payment because it's associated with the end of the tenancy, and the tenancy is renewed, therefore it's at the end of the next tenancy. So you will have 28 days from the date you sign that renewal tenancy to give that checkout fee back, otherwise it will become a prohibited payment. Similarly, if the tenancy drops onto a statutory or contractual periodic, you will then have 28 days from the 31st of May 2020 to give that back. So you really do want to think about and make sure you've got in your CRM systems a flag that says this tenancy has a checkout fee that's prepaid, must remember to give it back, otherwise I'm liable for quite substantial penalties. That's fees. Now, can I go on? Is now a good time to go on to deposits, William, and how deposits work during the transition?
Actually, we're going to come on to that in just a second, David. So no, I might say hold that thought for a second.
I asked that because the fees during the transition period and the deposits during the transition period are different. So fees, we've got that 12-month 31st of May 2020 backstop date, doesn't exist with deposits, but I'll come on to that later.
Yeah, it is probably a good time just to remind people what the liabilities are here if they are found in breach.
Indeed. So for first offence, it is a £5,000 fine, and of course you have to return the prohibited payment, and you can't use a Section 21 until you've returned the prohibited payment. So, and do bear in mind, a prohibited payment will be any fees that are charged, but also any holding deposit taken in excess of a week, any security deposit taken in excess of 5 or 6 weeks. So one, you'll have to return that prohibited payment, and you can't use Section 21 until you've returned it. 2, for first offences, a £5,000 fine, and therefore, and 3, for second and subsequent offences over a 5-year period from the first offence, that is a £30,000 fine, or the local authority can choose a criminal prosecution, which is unlimited fine and a banning order. On top of that, what I would say is it's per breach. So take a student HMO with five tenants in it, and you charge each one of those a £300 fee. That's not one £5,000 fine. For your first offence, that will be five £5,000 fines. For your second offence, that will then be five £30,000 fines. Similarly, if that £300 fee was made up of contract negotiation, referencing and inventory, that wouldn't be one offence, that would be three separate offences. So take that 5-bedroom HMO, you're potentially looking at 15 £5,000 fines, and all you'll have taken is 1,500 quid. So it really isn't worth trying to breach the ban.
Right. And just before we move off this section, do you want to just clarify that point out, rolling contracts? How do they fit in here?
So the rolling contracts, if the tenancy is already on a rolling contract, you can continue charging up to the 31st of May 2020. If the tenancy drops onto a rolling contract after the 1st of June this year, again, you can continue charging fees up to the 30th of May 2020. So do make sure you've got a big X on that date in your calendars, that any fees that you are holding for any tenancies have to be repaid within have to be repaid within 28 days of the 31st of May next year.
Yeah, great. I'm going to move on, but just before I do that, I just want to summarize, because we had quite a few questions around students, but and again, David, you can correct me here, but if I'm paraphrasing, the key thing that matters is the date that the contract was entered into. So for example, a question, say, for example, from Emma Dyson at Belvoir, who was concerned about student applications in Cambridge, where she's got it all agreed in May, but the student doesn't start till September, October. The date that matters there for the purposes of the Act is when the tenancy was agreed, which was before the 1st of June, not when the tenancy starts, which is when term starts. So again, I think that applies to all the student questions we've been asked here, but it's very helpful clarity.
As long as you've said, it is entered into, which is both parties signing and dating the contract prior to the 1st of June, you can still charge fees even if the tenancy doesn't start till August, September.
Yeah, great.